मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दसागरम्। अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः।
नमस्कार। भारतीय शिक्षण मंडल ने इस साल भी व्यास पूजा या गुरु पूजा बहुत धूमधाम से पूरे देश भर में मनाई है। वी ऑल नो दैट व्यास पूजा इज वन ऑफ द इम्पॉर्टेंट सेलिब्रेशंस ऑफ भारतीय शिक्षण मंडल, एंड दिस ईयर वी सेलिब्रेटेड इट वर्चुअली। हमने ऑनलाइन महोत्सव आयोजित किए और ऑनलाइन महोत्सव के माध्यम से हमने प्रयास किया कि हम पूरे देश में कोने कोने तक जहाँ जहाँ भी भारतीय शिक्षण मंडल के कार्यकर्ता हैं या जहाँ जहाँ भी कार्यक्रम संभव है वहाँ किए जा सकें। Our Guru Puja Mahotsav on 5th of July was a great success. We had the privilege of having Swami Akshar Vatsalanand ji from Swami Narayan Temple. और इस कार्यक्रम को पूरे देश भर में 17,000 लोगों से भी ज़्यादा लोगों ने देखा है। More than 17,000 people viewed this program. This is a great success. उसके बाद हमने आह्वान किया था एक वीडियो क्लिप के माध्यम से जो हिंदी और अंग्रेजी दोनों भाषाओं में बनाई गई थी, और ये वीडियो क्लिप देश में 5,000 से ज़्यादा लोगों तक पहुंची है। वी आर फॉर्चुनेट दैट आवर वीडियो क्लिप रीच्ड up to 5,000 people, and when we say 5,000, this means 5,000 responsible persons of Bharatiya Shikshan Mandal, office bearers and karyakartas who spread this message throughout the country through different mediums. इसके साथ ही अलग अलग विद्यालयों में कार्यक्रम हुए हैं। We celebrated this function in different schools where we could get more than 2,500 programs being conducted in these 6-7 days. और भी कार्यक्रम हो रहे हैं। लगातार कार्यक्रम होने की सूचनाएं हमें प्राप्त हो रही हैं और हमारी उम्मीद है कि इस 15 दिन के अंदर में शायद हम लोग ये आंकड़ा 5,000 से पार कर जाएं। We are also fortunate that many Karyakartas celebrated Guru Puja in their houses, residences. तो इस तरह से जो गृह समारोह हुए हैं वो 1,500 से ज़्यादा हुए हैं, एंड दैट इज़ अ रिमार्केबल अचीवमेंट। इसके अलावा हमने प्रयास किया कि गुरु तत्व को लेकर, गुरु पूजा के विभिन्न आयामों को लेकर हम देश के ख्यात लब्ध विद्वानों के व्याख्यान आयोजित करें। A lecture series was organized for 7 days covering different aspects of Guru Puja in our life. देश के ख्यात नाम विद्वानों ने इसमें भाग लिया। 6 जुलाई को देश के ख्यात नाम वैज्ञानिक श्री विजय भटकर जी ने व्याख्यान दिया और उन्होंने कंटेम्प्ररी रेलेवेंस ऑफ गुरु परंपरा इस पर अपनी बात कही। On 7th July we had lecture by the Vice Chairman of University Grants Commission, Professor Bhushan Patwardhan, and he delivered lecture on reinventing Guru Parampara in universities. 8 तारीख को हमने देश की प्रख्यात कला गुरु डॉक्टर शोभना नारायण का व्याख्यान आयोजित किया, कला क्षेत्र में गुरु परंपरा का महत्व, इस विषय पर। एंड ऑन 9th we had a lecture by Swami Hari Brahmanand who delivered lecture on Guru Parampara and personality development. हरि ब्रह्मानंद जी ने व्यक्तित्व विकास और गुरु परंपरा पर 9 जुलाई को अपना व्याख्यान दिया। देश की प्रख्यात खेल गुरु सुनील डबास जी ने क्रीड़ा जगत में गुरु परंपरा के महत्व पर अपना व्याख्यान दिया। और उसके बाद 11 तारीख को प्रोफेसर भरत गुप्त, जो देश के प्रख्यात इंडोलॉजिस्ट हैं, उन्होंने भारत की शास्त्र परंपरा में कैसे गुरु तत्व का महत्व है उसके बारे में अपना व्याख्यान दिया। प्रोफेसर भरत गुप्त डिलीवर्ड हिज लेक्चर ऑन द गुरु परंपरा इन इंडियन टेक्सचुअल ट्रेडिशंस। वी नो ही इज एन एमिनेंट इंडोलॉजिस्ट। 12 जुलाई को प्रोफेसर जगदीश कुमार, जो वाइस चांसलर हैं जवाहरलाल नेहरू विश्वविद्यालय के, वो अपना व्याख्यान दे रहे हैं और उनका विषय है आचार्य की बदलती भूमिका। प्रोफेसर जगदीश कुमार, हु इज द वाइस चांसलर ऑफ जवाहरलाल नेहरू यूनिवर्सिटी, वुड बी डिलीवरिंग अ लेक्चर टुडे ऑन द रोल ऑफ आचार्य इन द चेंजिंग सिनेरियो। ये सारे विषय बहुत रिलेवेंट, बहुत महत्वपूर्ण थे। एंड आई एम हैप्पी दैट ऑल द एमिनेंट एक्सपर्ट्स dealt with deep sense of authority and deep sense of Indianness in their thoughts. जिस तरह की हम बात करते हैं कि भारतीय शिक्षा में गुरु परंपरा का क्या महत्व है, भारत की संस्कृति में गुरु परंपरा का क्या महत्व है, उस सारे महत्व के ऊपर ये पूरी की पूरी फेसबुक व्याख्यान श्रृंखला थी। वी आर हैप्पी टू शेयर दैट मोर देन 12,000 people joined this Facebook live lecture series, and this is on YouTube, and the message would go to millions when it keeps on spreading. और ये एक और बहुत महत्व की बात है कि ये जो आंकड़े हैं ये सिर्फ आंकड़े नहीं हैं। ये बात इसलिए आपको बताना ज़रूरी है कि इन दिनों जिस तरह से सोशल मीडिया पर कोई भी चीज़ विस्तारित की जाती है, पब्लिश की जाती है, उसका प्रसारण होता है, तो उसमें कई तरह के कमर्शियल एंगल रहते हैं। लेकिन ये जो आंकड़े हम आपके सामने बता रहे हैं, ये सारे के सारे आंकड़े ऑर्गेनिक ग्रोथ के आंकड़े हैं। भारतीय शिक्षण मंडल के कार्यकर्ताओं के माध्यम से एक जगह से दूसरी जगह, दूसरी जगह से तीसरी जगह ये सारी चीज़ें पहुंची हैं, और इसलिए ये हमारे लिए बहुत संतोष का, बहुत आनंद का विषय है। वी आर हैप्पी टू शेयर दैट दीज फिगर्स आर ऑफ ऑर्गेनिक ग्रोथ ऑफ आवर एक्सपेंशन एंड आउटरीच थ्रू डिफरेंट कार्यकर्तास स्प्रेड अराउंड द कंट्री। हम आशा करते हैं कि गुरु पूजा का, व्यास पूजा का ये जो पूरा का पूरा कार्यक्रम है, ये इसी तरह निरंतर जारी रहेगा, और व्यास पूजा का जो हमारा लक्ष्य है वो इस वर्ष हम उस लक्ष्य को प्राप्त करेंगे। वी नो दैट द सर्कमस्टांसेस आर वेरी डिफिकल्ट, वी आर फेसिंग चैलेंजेस बिकॉज ऑफ दिस कोविड-19 पेंडेमिक। उसके बावजूद हमारा लक्ष्य और हमारा ध्येय और हमारा संकल्प, ये तीनों चीजें कहीं भी डिगने वाली नहीं है। हमारे गुरु के प्रति, गुरु की परंपरा के प्रति और गुरु द्वारा दिए गए ज्ञान के प्रति जो हमारा आदर भाव है, जो हमारा सम्मान है, वो इसी तरह अक्षुण्ण रहेगा, और निरंतर हम लोग अपने गुरु का सम्मान करते रहेंगे। हम जानते हैं गुरु का सम्मान होगा तभी राष्ट्र उन्नति करेगा। अनलेस द टीचर, अनलेस द गुरु इज रिस्पेक्टेड एंड रिगार्डेड, नो कंट्री कैन फ्लरिश, नो कंट्री कैन डेवलप। और भारत को आगे बढ़ना है, निरंतर आगे बढ़ना है, और उसके लिए गुरु का सम्मान बहुत आवश्यक है। एक बार फिर से आप सभी को व्यास पूजा की, गुरु पूजा की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं और हम लोग इसी तरह निरंतर अपने लक्ष्य पर आगे बढ़ते रहें, यही अपेक्षा आप सबसे है। आप सबको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आप सभी स्वस्थ रहें, आप सभी सुरक्षित रहें, अपना भी ख्याल रखें और समाज में सभी लोगों का ख्याल रखें, अपना दायित्व अच्छी तरह निभाएं। बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं।
नमस्कार। भारतीय शिक्षण मंडल द्वारा गुरु पूर्णिमा उत्सव के उपलक्ष्य में आयोजित व्यास पूजा व्याख्यानमाला में आप सबका स्वागत है। यह व्याख्यानमाला दिनांक 5 जुलाई से प्रारंभ की गई थी और आज अपने अंतिम पड़ाव पर है। आज हमारे को जेएनयू के कुलगुरु माननीय एम जगदीश कुमार का मार्गदर्शन प्राप्त होगा। वैसे तो आपसे भारत ही नहीं विश्व का शिक्षा जगत परिचित है, फिर भी मैं आपका संक्षिप्त में परिचय देने का यहाँ पर प्रयास कर रहा हूँ। आपने अपना एमएस व पीएचडी डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिकल इंजीनियरिंग आईआईटी मद्रास से किया। इसके पश्चात पोस्ट डॉक्टरल रिसर्च के लिए आप कनाडा गए, तो आपने वहां से किया। आप आईआईटी दिल्ली में डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिकल इंजीनियरिंग में प्रोफेसर हैं। आपको विभिन्न सम्मानों से सम्मानित किया गया, उनमें से कुछ का उल्लेख मैं यहाँ पर कर रहा हूँ। आपको आईआईटी दिल्ली ने 2013 में उत्कृष्ट शिक्षक सम्मान से सम्मानित किया। आपको 2008 में आईबीएम ने भी फैकल्टी अवार्ड से सम्मानित किया। आपकी लेख बहुत सारे पुस्तक और जर्नल्स में प्रकाशित हुए हैं। आपने करीब 250 लेख अभी तक लिखे हैं। आप विभिन्न जर्नल्स के एडिटोरियल बोर्ड पर भी हैं। आपको भारत सरकार ने विभिन्न विभागों में मनोनीत किया है, जैसे बॉडी ऑफ नेशनल काउंसिल ऑफ साइंस म्यूजियम के आप चेयरमैन हैं। आप यूजीसी व ट्राई के भी मेंबर हैं। अब मैं ज्यादा समय नहीं लेते हुए आपको आज के व्याख्यान के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं।
Namaskar to all of you. I am very happy to be talking to you through this virtual medium. You have been listening to many experts during the last few days about the role of the teacher. I would like to share some ideas about how the role of the teacher is becoming very important in today's times. Let me set the context of my discussion first. If you go back to how the older economists developed initially, you notice that during the daytime we used to work, and at the end of the day, after all our needs are met, we used to share our surplus with our neighbors, friends, and that helped us in building better relations, which is essential for a happy society. But over a period of time, we started using money as a medium of transaction for exchanging man-made goods, and that separated the consumer from the producer, and we moved from a situation of abundance of labor, goodwill and renewable resources to a situation of scarcity. And the advent of science and technology has further accelerated this alienation of one from the other. Imagine the people who lived 100 years ago. They used to use far less energy than what we are using today. But even that small energy that they needed, they derived from simple sources, renewable sources, such as animal labor, wood, water. It was, of course, a hard life, but it was socially rewarding and personally satisfying. But today, we use hundreds of times more energy than those people. Our lives have become much more complex. We have become self-centered and devoid of any social concerns. If you ask a behavioral neuroscientist, he would describe us as curiosity-driven, pleasure-seeking human animals. We are only interested in our immediate gratifications and insatiable desires, making everything very addictive. This deprives us the opportunity to be self-aware and prudent, and it does not let us work towards building an equitable and sustainable society. As teachers, of course, we train our students to be rational thinkers. But when we become too rational, it takes us away from the neutral values such as love, compassion, and the willingness to share with each other, which are the foundations of a happy living. A rational person therefore becomes self-centered, and we know in social sciences that a person who is self-centered hardly contributes to the common good of the society. So in a nutshell, what has happened over a period of time with the advent of science and the emphasis on rational thinking, together with money as a medium of our transactions, we moved from a situation of abundance to scarcity. Wealth accumulation has become our main goal in our life. There is nothing wrong in creating more wealth, but what has become important in wealth creation, the driving force behind wealth creation, is greed, which is the shadow of the scarcity, our unwillingness to share with each other. So it is important, of course, to be rational, but in order to build a sustainable world, it is possible only if there is abundance. We need to create an environment where in the minds of the students, passion, intrinsic motivation, and willingness to share with each other become core values to the psychology of the students. Our lives will become more fulfilling and cooperative only in such an environment. We should make sure that not only we but our future generations should not become more anxious, addictive, fearful, competitive, and greedy than ever. And how can we do that? Teachers therefore play an important role. We need to become effective teachers if we want to create an ecosystem where students remain not only rational thinkers but also keep their focus firmly on neutral values. So what can we do as teachers? How do we sensitize our students to be rational as well as focus their attention on neutral values? Let me share a couple of thoughts on this. It is important that we focus on improving the quality of life than just the standard of living. And that is what is happening in today's life. We use the scientific and technological innovations and we try to improve our standard of living. There is nothing wrong with that. But what about the quality of life? I'm just reminded of a small story that I heard from a speaker when I was a student at IIT Madras. The speaker narrated a story, and in this story, a rich elderly person goes to the beach in his expensive car along with his grandson. And both the grandson and this elderly person, they play around in the beach, enjoy their evening there. And one day, this rich elderly person, he saw another elderly person who was playing with his grandson. So he goes there and asks him, what do you do? So this old man says, well, I catch some fish in the morning, I sell them for my living, and the rest of the day I play with my grandson on this beach. So this rich man says, well, can I give you one small idea? I am a businessman. Why don't you catch more fish? Then with that you will get more money, and with that more money you can buy a boat. So if you have a boat, you can go into the ocean and you can catch more fish, you will get more money, and with that money you can buy more boats, you can employ some more people, go into the ocean and buy more fish. You see, if you expand your business like this, you will become a rich man one day like me, and you can come with your grandson to the beach in a good car and enjoy. So this old man looks at this rich man and says, what do you think I am doing now? I am doing precisely what you are asking me to do. I am enjoying my life with my grandson, playing with him at the beach. So you see, this is the difference between just focusing only on standard of living, completely keeping our focus away from quality of life. Quality of life is it's a state of mind. It doesn't come just by acquiring more and more materialistic things in our life. And this is where spiritual development becomes an important aspect of our life. Instead of focusing only on material security, it is also important to be spiritually aware. Today, we are all going through this corona pandemic. We thought with these science and technological innovations we are invincible, but one small corona, few micron size corona, it has spread all over the world and we have become helpless. So you can see that while it is important to find scientific solutions to control this coronavirus, people are also undergoing anxiety, uncertainty and depression, stress. If you want to come out of this, and if you want to successfully face this challenge that has been thrown at us, we have to be spiritually strong, we have to be mentally strong. Therefore, spiritual development also is another aspect that we need to focus on if we want to create a healthy society. Another thing that we need to focus on is relational care for each other rather than mindless competition. It is an experience for all of us when we are traveling on a road. If somebody is met with an accident, he is bleeding, we take videos, we take photos rather than going and helping that person. Our life has become so competitive, we have become so short of time, we have to rush, we have to go and do things, we have very little time to help each other. So our focus on relational care is more important in life than just being competitive. We are talking about environmental degradation. It is very important that we protect our environment rather than exploit it. We heard about the rise in temperature, the glaciers melting, the climate change, the reduction in biodiversity. All these things are going to affect our life. So where is our focus on protecting environment rather than just exploiting? It is also important that we focus on social inclusiveness rather than dominating over each other. You may be a farmer in a village, you may be a scientist working in a lab, you may be a postman, or you may be a politician. Irrespective of from which section of the society you come from, all of us should have equal opportunities for growth and development. And that is the only way we can remain united. You can become a stronger country. So social inclusiveness, irrespective of from which cross section of the society you come from, is extremely important. These are some of the issues on which we need to put our focus firmly on, and we need to sensitize our students as teachers, either within the classrooms as we teach or outside the classrooms through dialogue and discussion. So, what do we want our students to become? We want them to become rational thinkers with a focus on improving the quality of life, spiritual development, relational care for each other, protect the environment, recognize and nurture the diversity, and work towards social inclusiveness. This is what we want them to become. So, if every individual has those goals to achieve, ultimately we should be able to create a happy society. Of course, the primary focus in our life is to achieve happiness, but you cannot achieve happiness consciously. Happiness is a byproduct of how we conduct ourselves in our life. And you often find that those people who are confident and who have high self-esteem are often happy people. And how does that happen? Why do they have more confidence and more self-esteem compared to others? Well, it is because of the fact that they are able to recognize their inner potential. Well, here let me tell you one incident that happened. After the lecture is over, when I am coming out of the classroom, there are students around asking questions. So one day one student asked me, "Sir, tell me one mistake that we should never commit in our life." So I told the student, well, I think there are two mistakes that we should not commit. Number one mistake that we usually commit is not recognize our own inner potential. It is important to recognize our inner potential. Everybody has a certain inner potential. It could be different from person to person, but you have inner potential. It is important to recognize that. The second mistake most of us commit is, even though we know our inner potential, we function only at a fraction of our inner potential. So these are the two mistakes that we should not commit. So people who are confident and who have high self-esteem, they recognize their inner potential and they try to function at the fullest of their inner potential. But we find that it is also important to find what is the purpose of life. And this is where the finding what is we are passionate about becomes an important aspect in our life. If we want to find a purpose in our life, the starting point is to find what is our passion, what is that we are passionate about in our life. You cannot find this overnight. Finding what is you are passionate about is a process. It may take some time, but that is the starting point. Once you find your passions through hard work, you need to convert those passions into special skills. and you have to use these special skills driven by your passion to serve the real needs of people around you. Once you find this sweet spot of passions, skills, and working towards the needs of people around you, that is when you have found a purpose in your life. And in order to lead a life with confidence and self-esteem, it is important that we find our inner potential and we find what is that we are passionate about and acquire special skills and work for the welfare of the other people. And that is what gives us ultimately the happiness in our lives. Let us now move to the next level of our discussion that we are having through this digital medium. As teachers, how can we motivate our students to be happy individuals with confidence and high self-esteem so that they can adopt a positive lifestyle? We must recognize the fact that the world that we live in is ambiguous and indefinite. Therefore, students often they try to disambiguate this world by forming expectations. How they conduct themselves in their life and what experiences they go through depends on two factors. Number one, the type of suggestions that they receive from different sources, be it the teachers, the parents, or the peers, and then the kind of expectations they build around these suggestions. These two factors influence the way the students conduct themselves in their life. This is where I think, as teachers, we must take a lead in providing suggestions and helping the students to form realistic expectations. If we can convince our students that if a realistic goal is formed, it is more realizable, then the prospect that the student will alter the approach in order to meet the expectation is much more. And this is where I would like to introduce you to a concept known as the power of suggestion. I will give you few examples to see how the power of suggestion can be used in our everyday interactions with the students to motivate them to become confident individuals. As teachers, we believe that our primary role in the classroom is to help the student acquire different kinds of cognitive skills, lower order cognitive skills. If it is a university, college level education, then higher order cognitive skills. While there are time tested techniques to improve these skills, there is one area in which, as teachers, we must play an important role. That is, in helping the students improving their life skills, in adopting a positive lifestyle so that they become confident individuals with high self-esteem. And this is where I think most of us have not paid much attention to a subtle and potent technique called suggestion in the classroom. Now, what is a suggestion and how suggestions can change and alter the behavioral pattern of the students, how suggestions can help the students conduct themselves in a positive manner in their life. Let me give you some real life experiments that have been done to examine the power of suggestion and how it influences our behavioral patterns. In a very interesting experiment, 3 independent groups were asked to find an inverted T buried in several distractions. The first group was told that if they sniff a scented pad, their ability to recognize this inverted T will be very high. And the second team was told that if they sniff a scented cotton pad, they will not be able to detect this inverted T so easily. And the third group was told nothing, but they were given a scented cotton pad and they were asked to sniff. At the end of the experiment, you will be surprised to know that the outcomes were exactly the same. The first group, they found this inverted T from the buried distractions much faster than the last group. And the second group took much longer time compared to the third group in finding this inverted T from the distractions. And how could this happen? How could this suggestion change the performance of the teams? Well, this is called response expectancy. This experiment clearly demonstrates that suggestions, if given correctly, they can affect the learning abilities of the students in order to achieve certain goals in a very positive way. Interestingly, suggestions can also lead to improved cognitive skills and improved memory performance. In our day-to-day life, to accomplish several tasks, we depend on what is known as the prospective memory. That is the ability to remember to perform a future action. For example, prospective memory tasks include simple things like remembering to take your chalk and duster to your classroom, and important prospective memory tasks such as ending your lecture on time. Now, these are prospective memory tasks that we perform, several such tasks in our life. Now, let us look at an interesting experiment that was done on two groups of people. So, one group of people were given a sham drug and they were told that this drug improves their memory power. And a second group was given the same sham drug, but they were not told anything. Interestingly, when they were asked to perform some very high intensity prospective memory tasks, the first group did much better than the second group. What could be the reason? Well, the mechanism of suggestion tacitly employed in this case, it did the trick in improving the performance of the first group. I can give several such examples, but the bottom line is that there is reasonable research evidence to show that expectancies can directly alter our subjective experience of internal states. As a result, we modify our behavior to produce a particular outcome when we anticipate it. This is called response expectancy theory. What these scientific studies done in detail, they tell us that while we may like to believe that our thoughts and our behaviors are rationally constructed, the fact is otherwise. The research shows different results. What do they show? They show that our thoughts and our behaviors are indeed influenced by all kinds of information, including the tacit suggestion and expectation. As teaching professionals, as teachers working in universities and colleges, it is important, it is worthwhile for us to stop and take a look at these findings so that they are given the importance they deserve. Can we do something differently in the classroom to see that our suggestions alter the response expectancies which moderate the teaching learning outcomes of our students? This is something that we need to examine very seriously. The fact that suggestions can positively impact the abilities of the student sounds intriguing, but however, there is enough evidence to corroborate it. Let me now bring to your notice an important issue that we all deal with, that is depression and anxiety among the students. We often have to deal with students who are depressed about their academic performance, and these students, they continue to imagine that their academic performance is not going to become any better in spite of their best effort, and they conceal themselves in a spiral of depression. So as a professor, it is well within our reach to use the power of suggestion to bring such students out of this hopeless situation. There is, of course, enough research evidence to show that suggestion is a central factor in treating depression. Whenever we interact with the students who are doing badly in their academics, if we are insensitive to their anxieties, we are bound to heighten their negative expectancies. What we should be doing in such cases is to bolster their self-worth and enhance their motivation to do well by suggesting to them realistic and non-hopeless alternate expectations. This, I am sure, will result in a realistic hopefulness and could alleviate their distress. So, are we doing enough to take care of such students? Are we using the power of suggestion sufficiently in our classrooms when we interact with our students? This is something I would definitely suggest to the teaching community that we need to take it seriously, and we need to put every effort to improve the self-worth of the students. During our interactions, if we can convey to the students that they are matured and responsible individuals and they are capable of doing well in their academic pursuits, it is bound to send a positive trigger enhancing their self-esteem. And playing this partnership role in helping the students navigate through their learning process should be a natural ingredient of our discourse with our students. We all know that we want to be good teachers, we want to be effective mentors. For that, of course, we need to know our subject deeply, and we need to know how to communicate this effectively. But the purpose of teaching is beyond just providing cognitive skills to the students. What we want is, when a student goes through these layers of education right from school to the college and the university, we want them not only to be rational thinkers, but we want them to be good, responsible citizens with a set of values and ethics. In other words, a good teacher's effort aims at helping the student achieve not only their professional goals, but also their social, psychological and moral goals in their life. How do we do that? And this is where the role of the teacher comes. Let us examine how a teacher can become an effective teacher and an effective mentor. What needs to be done? I am going to very briefly discuss some of the ideas on this, and these ideas have been well discussed in literature, and the credit goes to those original thinkers. I am only summarizing and presenting to you. So, some of these educationists, researchers, they suggest that if you want to become an effective teacher, it is important that we become philosophical about the teaching practices. We know philosophy is a highly abstract subject. It may seem very distant and perhaps irrelevant in our everyday day-to-day life. When we are bothered by traffic jams, environmental pollution, and all kinds of stresses surrounding us, how can we think about philosophical questions? This question may arise in our mind. But however, education is emphasized that understanding the basic elements of philosophy and the kind of questions pure philosophy addresses is helpful in thinking more deeply about our own personal beliefs about teaching and mentoring. So therefore, let me discuss a few aspects of these philosophical questions that we need to examine. Because these are philosophical questions, there are no set answers. As we go through our experiences, we gather answers and we assimilate those answers within ourselves. And that is what ultimately gives us an identity and a set of values to practice in our life. So, what fundamental questions philosophy asks and what kind of answers may be possible to those questions? There are three fundamental questions philosophy asks. The first question is, what is real? And the second question is, how do I know what I know? The third most important question is, what is worthy and what do I value? Very briefly, let us examine each of these questions and see what kind of answers may be possible to these questions. Because why is that one teacher is different from other teacher? Why is that in every campus there are some great teachers whom people follow, to whom people go for advice? And this is because the way we try to get answers to these philosophical questions and assimilate and grow as a teacher. Now let us look at the first question. What is real? This is a metaphysical question, and you know metaphysics examines the nature of ultimate reality, and it provides us views on the causes of events that happen in the universe, or the nature of human beings, and the nature of divinity and the meaning of existence. Every time when we are walking into the classroom, when we are discussing with the students, we are actually trying to find an answer to what is real. For example, who am I? What am I? These are questions that we need to think about. Is the world, for example, absolute and permanent? Is it abstract and spiritual? Or is it subjective and ever changing? How often do we think about these questions? In our teaching, for example, when we are trying to discuss the subject matter with our students, we are trying to make them understand the perpetual and constructed nature of reality. Some of us may believe that reality is objectively constructed, and some of us may think that reality is a social and subjective construct. And this is where difference comes between one person to the other person. Do we believe that people are inherently good and altruistic, or humans are operating primarily from self-interest? Now, how we interact with our students depends on what answers we get. If we believe that humans are intrinsically, inherently good, if we believe that all our students are good, we trust them, we respect them. But if we think that they are operating out of their self-interest, we may often feel that, oh, they may be cheating in the exam. So the difference lies how we treat with our students as responsible individuals or not depends on our own belief systems, our own thinking process. Therefore, finding appropriate answers to this important question, what is real, is very, very important. Now let us examine the second question. So the second philosophical question that we need to examine is, how do I know what I know? This second philosophical concept is known as epistemology, which literally means that theory or explanation of knowledge. This question focuses on the origin, structure, and validity of knowledge. How do we know what we know? Is it revealed by God or by an authority such as an expert, a teacher, or a father or mother? By the individual's own reasoning or by the individual's sensory perception, or by the individual's intuition. You see that how do we know what we know? The information can come from different sources such as parents, teachers, or from personal sources such as reason and sensory experience. Therefore, here we are questioning the origin, structure, and validity of knowledge. If you look at Ramanujan, for example, he believed that all his discoveries are due to the inspiration of goddess Namagiri or by some mystical means. So, in the classroom, what kind of epistemological answers questions we raise and what kind of answers we get, that is bound to influence our teaching methods and the way we evaluate our students. Experts say that when we decide to use scientific methods or holy texts for knowledge, or do we encourage or discourage the use of intuition, all these are matters of epistemological questions. What is our belief about the validity of knowledge from external authorities versus knowledge that we obtain from our own personal reasoning? The choices we make about the kind of tests that we design, the kind of examinations we conduct for our students depends on what answers we get to these epistemological questions. Now let me give you a couple of examples that researchers have described. You know, when we write research articles, it is based on a rational and analytic approach. So this is called positivist epistemology. But when we encourage the students to take up case studies, that demonstrates a greater tolerance for ambiguity and multiple sources of data. But there are teachers who believe that multiple choice questions are the best to examine these students. In that case, the teacher believes that there is only one right kind of answers. But if you encourage the students to write assignments which require application of students' personal experience and knowledge, so in this case you believe that knowledge can be contextual and subjective. If you encourage the students to work in teams, for example, or you encourage them to discuss in the class as part of your teaching in the classroom, then it means that you believe that other people are also a source of knowledge, a valid source of knowledge. Now you see, therefore, why different teachers use different approaches when they examine the students, when they conduct the examinations. And the second question and the kind of answers that we get is bound to influence the way we are going to interact with our students and the way we are going to evaluate them. How do I know what I know? This is an important philosophical question. Now let us look at the third question. The third and last question that we wanted to examine is, what is worthy and what do I value? Basically, we want to know what is worthy as the right criteria for judgment. This philosophical question this philosophical concept is called axiology, and this addresses the nature of value, covering both ethics as well as aesthetics. As all of us know, there are four ethical frameworks. You have the utilitarian ethics, the justice ethics, virtue ethics, and care ethics. The first three frameworks assume that they are rational and universal. In contrast, the care ethics is contextual, non-universal, and relational. Now, depending on what ethical frameworks as a teacher that you follow, that will decide how you are going to treat your students. If you believe in care ethics, then you will be more kind to the student, you will be more helpful to the student. But if you believe in the first three ethical frameworks, which are supposed to be rational and universally applicable, you will be a very rigid person. So therefore, what kind of ethical frameworks that you follow in your life as appropriate decides how you interact with the students. Experts also say that our views on morality and values and what is right action, including whether these concepts should be taught in the classroom or not, that will decide how we are going to teach the students in the classroom. Because it is quite possible that some teachers may believe that the issues of morality and values and what is right action or not, it should be left to the individuals. You provide only the right kind of information to them and let them decide what they want to do. But some teachers may think that gently they can guide the students to tell them what is right, what is wrong. So this debate goes on, but however, in business schools, for example, studying ethics is an essential part of their training. Experts also say that values appear in aesthetics. Aesthetics deal with sensory experience and the feelings aroused by these experiences. Those teachers who believe in aesthetics, they may likely incorporate art, for example, drawing, even music and performances, skits and plays as part of their teaching learning processes. For example, I sometimes call my students to come to the stage and enact something or describe something. So these are related to the aesthetic aspects of teaching. So we have looked at three philosophical questions, and we also looked at what are the possible scenarios that are possible, and depending on what answers we try to imbibe within ourselves, it will ultimately decide our identity and our ethical and value system, and that is what makes one teacher different from the other teacher. So let me now conclude my discussion with you. We began with how as individuals, as societies, we are changing and becoming self-centered and more selfish, and how we need to change that situation in order to build sustainable and happy cooperative human societies. And we also discussed how students undergo different kinds of experiences, and as teachers our responsibility is to help them imbibe a positive style of living with confidence and self-esteem. And then we discussed what experts have said about becoming a good teacher, a good mentor. We looked at some of the philosophical ideas that have been discussed by several experts in literature, and I have summarized and presented those ideas to you to understand what it means to become a good teacher and a good mentor, and how it is a lifelong journey. We cannot become a good teacher and mentor in a month or in a year or in few years. It is a lifelong journey, and that is what the experts say. I would like to once again acknowledge the researchers and the educationists who have presented these ideas. All that I have done is I have summarized those ideas and presented in front of you for your understanding, for your further analysis of these concepts. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to be with you and present some of these ideas, and I hope that all of us, we will strive to become good mentors and teachers and help our students grow in their lives. And this is what should be our main motto as teachers and gurus.